Don't bother coming to the Christmas party this year. Those were the first words my dad spoke when I picked up the phone. Not Merry Christmas. Not even a polite "How are you?" Just that cold, sharp sentence that felt like it cut straight through me. For a moment, I didn't even know how to respond. I froze, the receiver pressed against my ear, thinking maybe I had misheard him. Maybe there was some kind of noise in the background. Or maybe my dad was trying to pull one of his awkward jokes, the kind that never really landed. But then I heard his tone. It wasn't playful. It wasn't teasing. His voice was flat, heavy, serious, almost like a final judgment. My heart started pounding, and I forced myself to ask, "What do you mean, Dad? What are you talking about?" Instead of laughing it off or explaining, he repeated himself, slower this time, like he wanted every word to sink in. I said, "Don't come to the Christmas party this year. Stay home." I remember gripping the edge of my kitchen counter so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My throat felt dry, but I pushed the words out. Why? What did I do? There was a pause. I could hear the faint clinking of dishes in the background. Probably Mom setting the table while Dad paced around, delivering this bombshell. Finally, he sighed and said the words that shattered me. "Your younger brother is coming. With his success, I don't want you there ruining the mood." At first, I couldn't even process it. I thought maybe he had misspoken, ruining the mood. I repeated, my voice cracking. "Yes," he said firmly. "Jason just got promoted. Everyone's going to be celebrating him, and I don't want any tension." And just like that, it all made sense. Jason, my younger brother, the golden child of the family, had always been the star. Straight A's, awards, the kind of son my dad could brag about to anyone who would listen. And now, with his new promotion making headlines in our small town, Dad wanted the spotlight to shine only on him. But at what cost? My absence? I hung up the phone feeling like I'd been erased, as if in my dad's eyes, I wasn't just a disappointment, I was an embarrassment. At first, I thought he was joking. My dad had this habit, especially when I was younger, of teasing me in ways that weren't always funny, that were meant to be lighthearted, like calling me lazy bones if I stayed in bed too long on a Saturday, or pretending to ban me from dinner if I came home late. Most of the time, it was his way of trying to get a laugh, though the jokes usually stung more than they amused. So when he said, "Don't bother coming to the Christmas party this year," my mind immediately searched for the humor in it. Maybe he was testing me. Maybe he'd laugh after a few seconds and say, "Relax, son. Of course you're invited. Don't take everything so seriously." But the laughter never came. Instead, there was silence. The kind of silence that sits heavy in your chest, where you can hear your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. I waited for some kind of chuckle, but all I heard was his breathing, slow, steady, and unbothered. That's when it hit me. His tone wasn't playful. It wasn't teasing. It wasn't even angry. It was flat, serious, final, like a judge slamming down the gavel after delivering a sentence. There was no room for negotiation. No chance of him saying, "Just kidding." His words carried the weight of decision. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a joke. It was real. A pit formed in my stomach. I felt this strange mix of disbelief and humiliation wash over me. Disbelief, because I couldn't understand how my dad, my own father, could actually mean what he had just said. Humiliation, because if he was serious, then it meant he didn't see me as part of the celebration, as if I was an outsider to my own family. I wanted to protest, to laugh nervously and say, "Come on, Dad, that's not funny." But my voice caught in my throat. I could feel the heat rising in my face, my hands trembling as I held the phone tighter. For the first time in a long time, I felt small, really small. Like no matter what I had done, no matter how hard I tried, I would always be the son he didn't want to claim in front of others. My chest tightened with each passing second, like an invisible hand was squeezing my ribs, making it harder and harder to breathe. The silence on the line tracked on, and the longer it stretched, the more unbearable it became. Finally, I found my voice. It wasn't steady, it cracked. Almost like I was a kid again being scolded, but I managed to speak. Why? Dad, why would you say something like that? Why would you ban me from Christmas? Of all days. The words tumbled out in a rush. I wasn't just asking about the party anymore. I was asking why I never seemed to be enough for him. Why every achievement of mine was brushed aside while Jason's every step forward was celebrated. Like he had discovered fire. Christmas was supposed to be about family, about togetherness. Growing up, it was the one day when we put aside our arguments, sat around the tree, and at least pretended to be a happy family. And now my own father was shutting the door on me. On that day, I pressed the phone harder against my ear, desperate for some kind of explanation, a reasonable excuse, anything that would soften the blow. Maybe there wasn't enough space at the house. Maybe he was worried about travel restrictions or some family drama I didn't know about. But deep down, I knew the truth before he even spoke. It wasn't about space. It wasn't about logistics. It was about me. I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper now. Dad, what did I do wrong? Why don't you want me there? My heart thudded so loudly I could swear he must have heard it through the phone. It felt like I was 12 years old again, begging him to come to one of my school plays, only to hear him say he was too busy. The same holiday came rushing back. The silence stretched again, cruel and deliberate. And then, finally, he sighed this long, heavy sigh that told me he wasn't struggling with what to say. He already knew. He just didn't care how much it would hurt me. I braced myself, because I had a feeling the answer was going to cut deeper than I was ready for. His reply struck harder than I expected. Your younger brother is coming. With his success, I don't want you there ruining the mood. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Maybe my phone glitched. Maybe there was noise in the background. But no, he repeated it clearly, each word sharp and deliberate, like a blade being twisted deeper into me. I felt my throat dry up, my palms clammy against the phone. Jason, my younger brother, had just landed a massive promotion at his firm. Everyone in our small town was buzzing about it. His face had even been in the local paper with the headline, "Young Executive from Our Hometown," making big waves. I was proud of him. Honestly, I was. But hearing my dad frame it as if my very presence would ruin that success, it was crushing. I stammered, "Dad, what do you mean ruin the mood? Why would me being there ruin anything?" His tone hardened. "Jason worked hard for this. Everyone will be congratulating him. And I don't want your attitude to spoil it." My attitude? That was his excuse. Memories came flooding back all at once. Every holiday where Jason's achievements were front and center and mine were brushed aside. Every time I tried to share something small I was proud of, a project at work, a new skill I learned, only to be met with silence or a dismissive nod. And now, apparently, my very existence at the Christmas party would cast a shadow over Jason's success. It felt like being erased. Like Dad had drawn a line through me and decided I wasn't even part of the family celebration anymore. My chest burned with humiliation and anger. But beneath that, there was something even heavier, sadness. Not because Jason was successful, I was happy for him, but because my dad couldn't see us as two brothers who could celebrate together. He only saw one son worth showing off, and one son to be hidden away. I stood there in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, realizing in that moment that to my dad, Jason wasn't just the favorite. He was the only son that mattered. You see, growing up, Jason was always the golden child, the kind of kid who seemed to have life figured out before the rest of us even knew what we were doing. From the time he was little, he had that spark, that shine that made people stop and say, "Wow, that kid's going places." School was effortless for him, straight A's, year after year. And he didn't even have to stay up late studying like the rest of us. Teachers adored him. I still remember one of my old math teachers once saying to me, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" I laughed it off at the time, but deep down, it stung. Jason wasn't just passing classes, he was setting the curve, the example everyone else was measured against. And it wasn't just academics. On the field, he was a natural too, captain of the soccer team by his sophomore year, leading them to back-to-back championships. Every Friday night game, the stands would fill with parents, neighbors, classmates, and my dad, front row, cheering louder than anyone. Jason would score a goal, and Dad would leap up, clapping so hard his hands turned red. I can still see the pride on his face, like Jason had just won the World Cup. Then came the scholarships. Big-name universities lined up to recruit him, offering full rides and programs designed just for top students. I remember the day the letter from his dream school arrived. Dad opened it before Jason even got home and practically threw a parade in the living room. He called every relative we had, telling them how his son was going to make the family proud. And you know what? Jason lived up to it. He didn't just go to college, he thrived. He climbed the ladder fast, landing a high-paying job that made even people outside our family look at him with admiration. Our little hometown couldn't stop talking about him. He wasn't just a success story, he was the success story. He wasn't just successful, he was the type of son parents dream about. The kind they love to brag about at every party, every gathering, every chance they get. And in my dad's eyes, Jason wasn't just the golden child. He was the only child that seemed to matter. Meanwhile, there was me. I wasn't failing. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't out making trouble or throwing my life away. But compared to Jason, I may as well have been invisible. I didn't get into a fancy university. Not because I didn't try, but because I just wasn't that kind of student. I worked hard, sure, but the straight A's didn't come easily to me. I was the kind of kid who had to stay up late, reread the same chapters twice, and still only manage a B. And in my dad's eyes, that wasn't good enough. When high school ended, Jason had his scholarships, his future lined up neatly with a bow on top. Me, I took a different route. I went straight into the workforce. My job wasn't glamorous. It didn't earn headlines in the local paper. And it wasn't the kind of thing you brag about at family reunions. But it kept me afloat. It paid the rent, kept food on my table, and gave me a sense of independence. Still, every time I tried to share something about my work, my dad's reaction told me everything I needed to know. If I told him I had been promoted to shift supervisor, he'd nod absent-mindedly and then change the subject. If I mentioned I had finally saved enough to buy my new car, he'd barely glance up before saying, "That's good. Did you hear Jason just bought a brand new one?" It wasn't that I was doing nothing with my life, it was that whatever I did was always measured against Jason. And in that comparison, I always came up short. I learned quickly that my victories weren't worth mentioning. Why bother? They'd only be overshadowed. And so I settled into a quiet rhythm: work, home, sleep, repeat. My life wasn't extraordinary, but it was mine. I thought that would be enough. But to my dad, it never was. In his eyes, I was just average, the filler child, the one you don't brag about, the one you mention only in passing. While Jason shined like gold, I was the background, forgettable, ordinary. And that label, ordinary, followed me everywhere, whether I wanted it or not. And the difference between me and Jason didn't just stay in school or at work, it followed us everywhere. Every Christmas, every birthday, every single family dinner. It was like stepping into an arena where I was competing in a game I never agreed to play. The spotlight was always fixed on Jason. Whatever he said, people leaned in to hear it. Whatever he accomplished, the room erupted with praise. And me, I was background news. Christmas was the hardest. I can still picture Jason would walk in wearing a sharp suit, carrying expensive gifts he could easily afford. Dad's eyes would light up the second he saw him, like the whole room just got brighter. Then Jason would start talking about his latest promotion, about the business trips he was taking, about the exciting new people he'd met. Everyone listened in awe, nodding along as if they were hearing stories from a celebrity. And then there was me, sitting there with my modest gifts, trying to think of something to say that might spark the same reaction. Sometimes I'd mention something small like a project I'd finished at work or a skill I was proud of learning, and Dad would give me that glance, not outright cruel, not openly dismissive, but sharp enough to say, "That's it, that's all you've got." Those looks hurt more than words ever could. Words, at least, could be argued against. A look, though, a look carries judgment you can't fight back against. It made me feel like a shadow, like no matter how much I tried, I'd never shine in the same way Jason did. Birthdays weren't much different. Jason would get celebrated like a king, while mine felt more like an obligation. A quick cake, a small gathering, and a passing happy birthday, son. Before the conversation shifted back to Jason's latest accomplishment, it was as if my milestones didn't even count. And the worst part, Jason never asked for it. He never rubbed it in. It wasn't his fault, but Dad's constant comparisons turned every family moment into a reminder that in his eyes, I wasn't good enough. And over time, I started to believe it. Now, with Jason's latest success making headlines, it felt like Dad had finally given up on me altogether. Before, the comparisons were subtle and spoken, but still sharp enough to wound. Dad didn't need to say, "Jason's better than you." His tone, his body language, the way his eyes lit up for Jason but didn't for me at all said enough. But this time was different. This time, it wasn't just about comparison. It wasn't just about me being less than. It was about me being unwanted, actively excluded. He didn't just want Jason to shine, he wanted me gone, completely erased from the picture, like I was a blemish on the perfect portrait of our family. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest, because up until then, I held onto a sliver of hope. I told myself, maybe Dad's just tough on me because he wants me to do better. Maybe deep down, he's proud of me in his own way. But hearing him say I shouldn't come to Christmas because I would ruin the mood, that shattered every excuse I had ever made for him. This wasn't about pushing me to grow. This was about him being embarrassed by me, ashamed of me. And what stung the most was the timing. Christmas, the one day that's supposed to be about love, family, and togetherness. The one time of year when differences should be set aside, when we come together not because of success or failure, but simply because we're family. And yet, my father decided even that wasn't reason enough to include me. It wasn't about something I did wrong. I hadn't hurt anyone, hadn't caused a scene, hadn't disrespected anyone. My only crime was not being good enough in his eyes, not shining bright enough, not living up to the golden standard Jason had set. And that cuts deeper than anything else, because when a stranger dismisses you, you can brush it off. But when it's your own father telling you that you don't belong at your family's Christmas celebration simply because you aren't worth, why, that's a wound words can't fully describe. It doesn't just sting, it lingers. I spent days replaying that phone call in my head, like a broken record I couldn't shut off. "Don't bother coming to the Christmas party this year." Those words echoed over and over, each time cutting a little deeper. It wasn't just a rejection of one night, it felt like a rejection of me. My own father had essentially said, "You're not wanted. You don't belong." At first, anger was the loudest emotion. I paced my apartment, fists clenched, muttering to myself about how unfair it was. I wanted to pick up the phone, call him back, and demand an explanation. I wanted to scream at him, to remind him of everything I had done for myself, everything I had gone through without leaning on anyone else. But then the anger would dissolve into something heavier, sadness, the kind that sits in your chest and makes it hard to breathe. There were moments when I considered just letting it go, skipping Christmas altogether. Why put myself through that humiliation again? Why sit in a room where I was nothing more than the background character in Jason's Highlight reel. The thought of being excluded hurt. But the thought of showing up and being treated like I didn't matter hurt even more. But then my thoughts always circled back to Mom. None of this was her fault. She had always been my quiet defender, the one person who tried to remind Dad that I mattered to. I remembered so many dinners where Dad would cut me off mid-sentence to gush over Jason's newest achievement, and Mom would gently nudge the conversation back to me, asking about my day, my job, my small wins. Her voice was softer, sometimes, drowned out by Dad's booming pride for Jason. But it was there. She tried. She always tried. And that's what made this decision harder. If I stayed away, I'd be letting Dad win. I'd be giving him exactly what he wanted, a Christmas without me. But if I showed up, I risked facing more of the same cold stares, the forced smiles, and the whispers behind my back. The phone call had only lasted a few minutes, but its weight followed me everywhere for days. It wasn't just about a party anymore. It was about where I stood in my family. And the painful truth was, I wasn't sure I stood anywhere at all. That nights before Christmas, I was sitting alone in my apartment, the glow of the small tree in the corner doing little to lift my mood. I had been half watching a holiday movie, but my mind wasn't really there. It kept drifting back to that phone call. The silence of my apartment felt heavier than ever, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being completely forgotten by my own family. Then came a knock at the door. At first, I thought maybe it was a neighbor, or maybe I had accidentally ordered something online again without realizing it. But when I opened the door, I froze. It was Mom. She stood there bundled in her winter coat, holding a small tin of cookies, the same kind she baked every Christmas for as long as I could remember. But this time, her smile was missing. Her face carried the kind of sadness that only a mother can show, like she was carrying the weight of both her own pain and mine at the same time. Mom, I said, my voice cracking. Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and handed me the cookies. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked around my apartment, then back at me, and her eyes watered. In a whisper, she said, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I didn't want this. I begged your dad not to do it. Her words pierced through me. For a second, I couldn't even respond. I had been holding onto this quiet hope that maybe Dad would come to his senses. Maybe he'd call back and say he didn't mean it. But hearing Mom say it out loud, confirming that this was real, that she had tried and failed to change his mind, made it all sink in. I gestured for her to sit, and we settled on the couch. She placed the tin of cookies on the coffee table, but neither of us touched them. The room was heavy with unspoken feelings. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the frustration, and the heartbreak. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't just here to bring me cookies. She was here because she couldn't stand the thought of me being alone, cut off from the family she knew I still loved. We sat down at my small kitchen table, the tin of cookies resting unopened between us. For a while, neither of us said a word. The silence wasn't empty, it was heavy, filled with everything we both knew, but hadn't spoken out loud. Mom kept looking at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously, like she was afraid of what she was about to tell me. Finally, she took a deep breath and whispered, your dad, he thinks Jason's success proves he raised one good son. My heart sank. But before I could even process it, she continued, her voice cracking, and he's embarrassed about how he talks about you to his friends. That word embarrassed hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always suspected that Dad wasn't proud of me, but hearing it confirmed from my own mother's lips was different. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was shame. I sat there, frozen, staring at the cookies like they might somehow erase the words I'd just heard. My stomach twisted, and I could feel my throat closing up. My dad wasn't just comparing me to Jason. He was actively ashamed of me. Mom reached across the table, her hand trembling as she tried to grab mine. Her eyes were wet, pleading with me to understand. I don't agree with him. You are my son too. And I am proud of you. I wish he could see what I see. But I couldn't even bring myself to squeeze her hand back. All I could feel was the crushing weight of her confession. Images flooded my mind every Christmas dinner where Dad boasted about Jason's achievements. Every time I caught that subtle shake of his head when I mentioned my own life, all those moments suddenly made sense. He wasn't just indifferent, he was embarrassed. The silence stretched again, and this time it was unbearable. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask Mom why she had stayed quiet for so long. But deep down, I knew the answer. She loved Dad, and she loved me. She had been stuck in the middle all these years, powerless to fix the favoritism that had poisoned our family. For the first time in my life, I felt truly unwanted, not just by my father, but within my own family. Embarrassed. That single word echoed in my mind like a cruel bell that wouldn't stop ringing. I had suspected it for years, deep down in the quiet corners of my heart, but I never wanted to admit it. I always hoped I was just imagining things, that maybe I was too sensitive, or maybe I was misreading Dad's looks and comments. But hearing it spoken out loud, confirmed by my own mother, stripped away every excuse I had ever made. My father wasn't just disappointed in me. He wasn't just comparing me to Jason. He was ashamed of me. And that realization hit me harder than anything I'd ever felt before. It wasn't just about Jason's straight A's, his big promotions, or the way people in town admired him. It was about me, the son who worked quietly, who lived simply, who wasn't flashy or impressive. To Dad, I wasn't just ordinary. I was someone he avoided mentioning, someone he brushed over when talking to his friends, someone he pretended didn't exist because I didn't fit the picture of success he wanted to paint. I thought about all the years of family gatherings where Dad bragged about Jason's achievements, his job, his house, his car, and then I thought about how, when people asked about me, Dad's answers were short, dismissive, almost embarrassed. I had always noticed the shift in his tone, but I never let myself believe what it really meant. Until now, sitting there across from Mom, something inside me cracked. It wasn't anger, not at first. It was a deep, hollow sadness, the kind of sadness that doesn't make you cry, but instead makes you feel empty, like part of you has been scooped out and thrown away. I realized that no matter how hard I worked, no matter what small victories I had in my own life, they would never be enough for him. I could never win his approval. I can never erase the embarrassment he felt when he thought about me. And knowing that truth, hearing it confirmed by Mom, broke something inside me that night. A part of me stopped hoping for his love. Christmas Eve had arrived, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't at my family's gathering. Normally, this night would have been filled with laughter, the comforting warmth of my parents' home, and the familiar smell of Mom's cooking drifting through the house. But instead, I sat alone in my small apartment, surrounded by silence. The only sounds were the faint hum of the heater and the occasional buzz of my phone. Asterisk and buzz, it did constantly. Notifications kept popping up, one after the other. Cousins tagging me in group photos, relatives sending clips of the party, smiling faces everywhere. And at the center of it all was Jason, looking confident and happy, shaking hands and laughing as if the night had been perfectly scripted for him. Dad stood beside him, beaming proudly, introducing him to everyone like he was the guest of honor at a party he had orchestrated. Asterisk, I stared at the images on my screen, and a hollow feeling settled in my chest. And me, my chair at the table was empty. No one noticed. No one asked where I was. If they did, Dad brushed over it as though it didn't matter. The cruelest part wasn't just the absence, it was how natural it all seemed without me there. It was as if I had never belonged, as if my existence had been quietly erased from the family celebration. Asterisk, I scrolled through the photos again, each one pressing the weight of isolation deeper into my chest. There was Mom smiling behind Jason, cousins laughing and hugging, the twinkling lights reflecting off the ornaments on the tree, everything looked perfect. Everything except the glaring emptiness of my absence. Asterisk this was supposed to be Christmas or time for family, togetherness, and love, but instead, it was a sharp reminder of how invisible I had been made. Even the warmth of the season felt distant, like it belonged to everyone else but me. I could almost hear the laughter from the video clips, echoing mockingly through my apartment, emphasizing that I was not there. Asterisk, and yet, I couldn't look away. Each photo, each video, reminded me of my place in the family hierarchy, or rather, my lack of one. I had been left out, forgotten, erased. The night was meant to be joyful, but for me, it was a quiet, painful testament to the distance that Dad had created between us. Asterisk, I was just about to silence my phone for the night when it rang again, the sharp buzz cutting through the quiet of my apartment. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Jason. My first thought was confusion. Why would he call me on Christmas Eve, right in the middle of the big family party? I could almost picture him surrounded by relatives, laughter and music in the background. Asterisk, I hesitated before answering. My hand hovered over the phone as 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Was he calling to brag about the party? To tease me for not being there? Or worse, had he already heard about my absence and was calling to confront me? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and finally pressed the button. Asterisk, hey, bro, Jason's voice came through. But it wasn't the usual teasing tone. It was softer, quieter, almost hesitant. Why weren't you at the party? Mom looked miserable without you there. Asterisk, my heart froze. Did he not know? Was he really calling? Unaware that Dad had banned me from the celebration. A mix of relief and dread filled me all at once. Relief that Jason wasn't angry with me, and dread because the truth was about to come spilling out. Asterisk, the lump in my throat made it hard to speak. I swallowed, forcing my voice past the tightness in my chest. Jason, Dad didn't want me there, I whispered, the words tasting bitter as they left my lips. Asterisk, there was a pause on the other end of the line of silence so heavy it pressed against my ears. I could practically feel Jason's shock, the way his breath hitched slightly before he finally spoke again. I imagined him freezing in place, realizing the depth of what I had just revealed. Asterisk, it was strange, hearing nothing but the quiet on the other end of the line. The familiar background noise of the party seemed distant now, replaced by the weight of his silence. And in that silence, I felt both vulnerable and exposed. I had always felt overshadowed by Jason, like I existed in the background of his life. But now I realized how much our father's favoritism had shaped the reality we were living in. Asterisk, finally, Jason sighed a long, deep sigh that carried more emotion than I had heard from him in years. Dad's been doing this for too long, he said softly. He puts me on a pedestal I never asked for, and he tears you down. It's not right. Asterisk, those words struck me like a lifeline, offering a sense of understanding I hadn't felt in years. Asterisk, I swallowed hard, my throat tight, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the phone. Finally, I forced the words out, each one heavier than the last. I told Jason everything, the phone call from Dad, the cold, sharp way he had told me not to come to the Christmas party, the cruel explanation that my presence would ruin the mood. I told him how Dad's favoritism had made me feel invisible for years, how Jason's every success seemed to overshadow me, and how now his latest promotion had turned me into an embarrassment in the eyes of the man who was supposed to love me unconditionally. Asterisk, as I spoke, I hated myself a little for opening up. Vulnerability had never been my strength. But this time, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I needed someone to understand. Asterisk, and for the first time in years, Jason didn't respond with the usual quick jokes, dismissals, or casual reassurances. There was just silence on the other end of the line. I could almost feel him sitting still, processing each word as I spoke. The sound of my own breath felt loud in the quiet space between us. Asterisk, finally, I heard it, a long, heavy sigh. Jason's voice was quiet, low, and full of a weight I hadn't realized he carried all these years. Dad's been doing this for too long, he said. There was no accusation, no anger in his tone, just a calm acknowledgement of the truth. He puts me on a pedestal I never asked for, and he tears you down without realizing how much it hurts. It's not right. It's never been right. Asterisk, his words hit me like a wave. For so long, I had carried the burden of feeling lesser, invisible, like I had somehow failed my family simply by being myself. And here was Jason, my own brother, validating my pain, giving voice to the frustration and hurt that I had buried for years. Asterisk, in that moment, the distance I had always felt between us vanished. For the first time, I realized that the problem wasn't me, it was Dad. He had set us against each other, made me feel small to boost his own pride in Jason. And now, finally, someone in the family saw it clearly. Asterisk, Jason's words, quiet but sincere, gave me a sense of relief I hadn't expected. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel completely alone. Asterisk, Jason's voice cracked on the other end of the line, carrying an honesty I hadn't heard in years. You're my brother. I don't care if you're rich or not. I don't care about promotions or headlines. None of that matters to me. I wanted you there tonight. Asterisk, I froze for a moment, my chest tightening. Those words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I had felt invisible next to him, overshadowed by his every achievement, every success, every moment Dad had celebrated him. It was as if no matter what I accomplished, I would always be the ordinary one, relegated to the background while Jason shined in the spotlight. Asterisk, but hearing him say this, the raw sincerity in his voice made me realize something that I had buried for too long. Jason never wanted the rivalry that Dad had created between us. He never asked to be the golden child. All he had wanted was a brother, someone to share moments with, someone who belonged in the family not as a competitor, but as a companion. Asterisk, a mix of relief, warmth, and sorrow washed over me. Relief that Jason still cared, that he still valued me for who I was. Warmth, because for the first time in a long while, I felt seen by someone in my own family. And sorrow, because I realized how long I had carried this pain alone, thinking I was the only one affected by Dad's favoritism. Asterisk, I imagined him at the party, laughing with cousins, surrounded by family, yet still thinking of me. That image made my eyes sting, but it also filled me with hope. Maybe Dad had erased me from the party, but Jason hadn't erased me from his heart. That distinction made all the difference. Asterisk, in that moment, something inside me shifted. The weight of isolation that had pressed down for so long seemed a little lighter. I wasn't completely alone anymore. I wasn't invisible in the eyes of my family, not entirely. My brother had reached out, reminding me that blood ties weren't measured by wealth, success, or appearances, but by love, loyalty, and understanding. Asterisk, for the first time in years, I felt a sense of connection, a sense of belonging that Dad had tried to deny me. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start, a lifeline on a night I thought I would spend entirely alone. And that made all the difference. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke to the familiar sound of a knock at my apartment door. I had expected perhaps a delivery, or maybe just another reminder of the party I hadn't attended. But when I opened the door, I was shocked to see not just Mom, but Jason as well. He was holding a bag of gifts, and there was a fire in his eyes, a mix of determination and something that looked very much like righteous fury. Morning, he said, his voice carrying that unique mix of irritation and warmth that only he could pull off. Dad can have his perfect little party, he declared, stepping confidently inside. We're having our own Christmas, right here. For a moment, I just stared at him, stunned. Months of feeling invisible, overlooked, and constantly measured against his accomplishments seemed to flash behind my eyes. And yet, here he was choosing me, choosing us, choosing to create a moment that excluded Dad's judgment and favoritism, a moment that included love, warmth, and family in its truest sense. My heart swelled with disbelief and relief. A strange combination I hadn't felt in years. Jason had turned a night of exclusion into a morning of belonging, and the weight of that gesture hit me in a way I didn't expect. Mom stepped in behind him, gently setting down the tin of cookies she had baked the night before. Her eyes were soft, filled with a quiet pride that made my throat tighten. I realized then that we didn't need a perfectly decorated tree dripping with lights, or a dining room full of relatives buzzing with chatter. We didn't need a stage for Dad to parade Jason's achievements. The small, cluttered apartment filled with laughter, warmth, and the simple presence of each other was more festive than any grand party could ever be. Sitting there, I could feel the heaviness of the past year slowly lifting. This Christmas morning wasn't about perfection or comparison. It was about being seen, being chosen, and being loved for exactly who I was for the first time in a long time. The room felt like home, not a place where I was measured against someone else, but a place where I could simply exist and exist fully. The sound of our laughter mingled with the soft morning light, creating a memory I knew I would carry with me for years to come. We settled around the small, slightly wobbly kitchen table, cookies in hand, and for the first time that season, I truly laughed, deep, unrestrained laughter that seemed to chase away months of tension and hurt. Stories flowed easily between us, memories spilling out like warm sunlight into the room. For once, I wasn't being compared to anyone. There were no invisible scores, no whispered judgments, no silent glances reminding me of all the ways I had supposedly fallen short. I could just be myself. Jason leaned back, a sly grin on his face, teasing me about the ridiculous antics we pulled as kids. The time I tried to fix the Christmas lights and ended up tangling the entire tree, or the time we got caught sneaking cookies before dinner. His humor was gentle, never cruel, and it reminded me how easy it had once been to laugh together without any competition lurking in the background. Mom chimed in too, her quiet wit bringing the stories alive with a layer of warmth only she could add. She made jokes about my cooking disasters and Jason's stubborn streaks, and each comment felt like a gentle hug, a reassurance that we were truly a family even without Dad's approval hovering over us. The room was simple, lacking the grandeur of Dad's parties, the polished silverware, the perfectly set table, the endless stream of relatives showing off. But it didn't matter. The warmth that filled this small space was genuine, unforced, and far more precious than anything I had ever experienced at those perfect gatherings. Every laugh, every shared glance, every smile made me realize that this was what mattered: connection, presence, and love. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not for what I had achieved, not for how I measure up against Jason, not for the expectations Dad had placed on me, but for who I really was. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental about Christmas. It wasn't about impressing anyone, showing off accomplishments, or living up to some impossible standard. It was about family. It was about love. It was about being present and being recognized, however imperfectly, as someone who belonged. Sitting there, cookies in hand, laughter ringing in my ears, I felt it for the first time in years. Belonging, real, unshakable, and simple. After a while, Jason leaned back in his chair, a small, proud smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He looked at me with a mix of seriousness and warmth, as though he had been holding something inside that he could finally share. Then he spoke, his voice steady and unwavering. I confronted Dad after I learned the truth about your exclusion, he admitted, his eyes meeting mine. I told him if he can't accept both his sons, then he doesn't deserve to celebrate with either of us. The words hit me like a punch to the chest, yet at the same time, they filled me with a strange, freeing relief. For years, I had carried the heavy weight of being the ordinary son, the one who never quite measured up in Dad's eyes. Every achievement, every effort, every holiday had been tinged with comparison, overshadowed by Jason's accomplishments, and the constant unspoken reminder that I was less than. And for all those years, I had believed I was alone in feeling that pain. But now, here was Jason, my own brother. The person I had thought would only ever outshine me, standing firmly by my side. His loyalty, his courage, and his love were unmistakable. He had taken the bold step to speak the truth, to challenge Dad's unfair treatment, and to protect the bond between us. That moment shifted something deep inside me. I realized that I didn't have to bear the burden alone anymore. I wasn't invisible, and I wasn't unworthy. I was my brother's equal, and he had made sure I knew it. Mom watched us quietly from the kitchen counter, her eyes glistening with orange tears. She didn't need to say anything. The pride in her gaze said it all. Jason's words were not just for me. They were a declaration that family meant more than favoritism, more than status, more than appearances. I felt a wave of gratitude and love wash over me, combined with a new sense of empowerment. This was a turning point, a moment that would stay with me long after the last cookie had been eaten and the laughter had faded. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be supported, defended, and valued, not for what I achieved, but simply for who I was. And that Christmas morning, in our little makeshift celebration, I finally felt the warmth of a family that could choose love over judgment. That Christmas wasn't about grand decorations, glittering lights, or dozens of guests crowded into a polished dining room. It wasn't about who brought the most expensive gifts or who had the most impressive accomplishments to flaunt. Instead, it was quiet, simple, and real. A Christmas stripped down to what truly mattered. We exchanged small gifts, each chosen with care rather than extravagance. Jason handed me a thoughtful little book he knew I would love, and I gave him a framed photo of a memory from our childhood, something only we would understand. Mom's cookies, still warm from the oven, filled the room with a familiar scent that felt like home. We sipped hot cocoa, laughed at old stories, and reveled in the easy comfort of just being together. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't living in anyone else's shadow. I wasn't being measured against Jason's successes or compared to some ideal version of a son I could never be. I was simply me, and for once, that was enough. And maybe, just maybe, it was the first time I truly felt like I belonged, not because I was perfect or because I had achieved something impressive, but because I was loved for exactly who I was. The absence of competition, judgment, or expectation created space for joy, connection, and genuine family togetherness. I realized then that Christmas and family wasn't about appearances, grandeur, or status. It was about showing up, supporting each other, and creating your own moments of happiness, even in the face of exclusion or disappointment. Sitting there, surrounded by the warmth of Mom and Jason, I felt a quiet sense of peace settle over me. The laughter, the small gestures, the simple act of being chosen and included, it all added up to something far more meaningful than any party Dad had thrown. That morning, I understood that belonging isn't given by approval or achievements. It's nurtured by love, understanding, and the people who refuse to let you feel invisible. That Christmas, for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. Not in the shadow of anyone else, not on someone else's stage, but in the heart of a family that truly saw me, and that made all the difference.